Okay, good morning, nerds. Welcome to the second installment of the Cookie Clicker tutorial. Again, this is intended to teach some UI skills and some procedural generation, which will get started in sessions 3 and 4. Um, Session 2 is going to stick to the UI pretty closely. We'll start to move into some of the procedural and some of the other stuff in, again, sessions 3 and 4. Um, so in the last session, we basically set up a cookie-sized button and we learned how to make it interact with the text object a little bit, but it doesn't interact frankly, very well. And right now, we don't have a good way of keeping track of what is the value of our cash and how much do we have and things like that. And so we're going to start adding some of that right now. And we're going to do that by utilizing a game manager. And philosophically, there's a few different kind of quote unquote camps in Unity. How do we store this data? How do we share data? How do we shift data between objects? And kind of the two guiding ideas are either everything that needs data has its data where it is. So like for example, maybe since the cache needs to be displayed in the text object, maybe the text object keeps track of the cache. And then the other idea is we have a centralized game manager that kind of handles everything, and then things that need to display data or look at data or things like that can do that by looking at those objects, directly or indirectly. That way. So what we're going to do is the latter. So I tend to prefer using I tend to prefer kind of a hybrid of both, but in this case, we're going to be using a game manager to control things. And so the main way we do that is we actually need to lay down what is our controlling object. For that, what we're going to do is in our hierarchy here, we're just going to drop in an empty game object. So I'm going to do right click, create empty, and we're going to call that new game object, we're going to name it game manager. Obviously, we can call it anything we want, but game manager is nice and clear. And then we're going to tag it with game controller. And just because I like a clean board, I'm going to zero that out, which is wholly unnecessary. You're not going to notice anything if you do or don't do that, but it just makes me feel better to have my objects defaulted out. So, the game controller is a useful tag. Like any tag in Unity, from a purely technical standpoint, you can tag as many things with it as you want, but the standard convention is that we should only have one object tagged as the game controller, because then we can find, if we do a search for it or something else, we can look for the game controller and go, oh, there it is, and access it. So we usually only want to have one thing with that tag. Inside of there, I'm going to create a game manager script. So we're going to do that and create an add, and then I'm just going to go ahead and double click on it to go in. For now, we're going to keep that. There we go. We're going to keep that script pretty bare bones. You might have seen my other one here. I'd already done this once before with the previous code, but so we're going to kind of just take a look and get things started. We're going to keep this pretty simple. There is going to be some new code here that you probably haven't seen before, and kind of just a different technique to this than some of the stuff that we've done in some of our previous tutorials. The basic one that we're going to do is very common. We're going to do public float cache. And in this case, I'm using a float because we might want to do some partials and some percentages, especially when we get our cache per second. So I want to be able to use decimals. I may end up wanting to upgrade this to doubles later. I kind of do floats out of habit. But as the game expands, especially if we get into like trillions of dollars kinds of things, we may want to switch out all these floats for doubles. And you could just do a bulk find and replace later, and it really wouldn't hurt anything. So we're gonna do the next one. We're gonna do is public float cache per click, and this is basically going to give us the number of dollars that we want to add every time we click on a cookie. And for now, we want that number to be 1, and it's tempting to just do something like that. And a lot of good reasons to do it that way. But one of the things that we're going to have trouble as we try to scale the game, and we try to add more and more power-ups as we go, is modifying that number is going to get trickier and trickier and trickier. So instead, I want that number to be formula driven. I want the computer to figure out as needed how much should my cash per click be right now with the way the board state is. So like, if you have 5 different power-ups that are each leveled up in different stages, I wanted to take those into consideration, and I don't want to have to try to do convoluted math to figure it out. So we're just going to do cash per click. Note the no semicolon, no nothing. And we're going to change it into a parameter. And by doing these curly braces, and you're going to notice I did not make a function. And by doing these curly braces, we can do things called get and set that basically change how that variable is viewed. So if I do get and some curly braces, this is functionally, for all intents and purposes, a function, but it's not a function, but it's a function, but it's not a function. I don't know how to explain it better than that, sorry. But basically, it works like a function in the sense that we can return values. And what we're going to do is literally return a functional value. So we are going to say, hey, anytime you ask me what my cash per click is, I want to return the value of the get cash per click function. So get cash per click is going to happen. It's going to return a value. Then this is going to return into that variable. And because we didn't do, we could, I'm not gonna, but we could do set. And this is what would happen if somebody tried to do like cash per click equals, it would get processed here. But we're not actually going to do that. Instead, we're just going to leave this as a formula-driven get, and there is no way for a user or anybody else to set that variable. It's basically makes it a read-only variable, which is kind of cool. And then we're going to duplicate that exact same pattern. Eventually, I'm going to want a clicks per second kind of a thing. Oops, sorry, I'm having some keyboard troubles here. Control C, Control V. And instead of cash per click, I also want a cash per second. And we are going to return the cash per sec function. We could put everything that's going to be in these functions in my in here, but honestly, there's some good reasons to separate it out, so we're going to just leave it separated for now. And then now what we need to do is go ahead and actually write those functions. So we're going to go ahead and add in, sorry, I'm flipping through my notes here. We're going to go ahead and add 2 more functions to our code. We're going to do a float called get cash per click. And for now, because we only want this function to basically, at least in the beginning, just return $1 every single time, we're going to make this pretty easy and just do 1.0f. And then we're going to copy that and paste. Our cash per second is just going to be 0.0f. Now later on we're going to have more complicated formulas, and this is kind of overkill, right? Like we could have just said get cash per click is 1, cash per second is 0, and called it good. The nice thing is this is going to scale with us as we, it's fairly complex right now, especially for how simple the output is. But as we increase the difficulty of our program and the complexity of our power-ups and things like that, this is going to grow with us. So this is good long-term code. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves another function. I'm going to kind of wedge it here in between update and my cash per click. And this is going to be a public void called cookie clicked. And when I click on the cookie, what I want to do is I want to add cache. So I'm going to say cache plus equals. I want to add cache equal to the amount of cache per click that I have. So we're going to do cache per click. And we're going to go ahead and use that variable that we created. We could also call the get cache per click function, but I kind of like the readability of this, so we're going to kind of do it this way instead. Either way would give us the same result here. And that's about it for now. So we're going to go ahead and save that. Now in our game, all we need to do is adjust the button. So my cookie button. We're going to go ahead and add a click routine. I'm going to drag Game Manager in here. And again, we can pick from everything. Game Manager script shows up, as does our cookie clicked function. And now all I've got to do is when I run this, we can see over here in my Game Manager, there's my cache. It's currently 0. And as I click on things, every time I click, that cache goes up by 1, which is telling me that it's basically working. So our next step is we want to make the text object recognize that. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to look at that, and we're going to write some short code for that. I did expand out the text box. I had a recording error, so I already kind of worked ahead and then had to undo things. So there may be a few little spots here where things don't quite line up with yours at home, but I'm going to try to catch those wherever I can. But I did increase the size of the text box by dragging this little box down just to give it some more room to work with. And then the next thing that I'm going to do here is I want to show you guys some of the options in TextMesh Pro that are kind of useful. First off, you have all your standard formatting things. I can kind of stretch things out. I can look at some different font options. I can do things like centering. For this though, I do want to, because I am have the object aligned to the top left, or anchored to the top left rather, I also want to keep my text kind of aligned to the top left. But the really cool thing with TextMesh Pro is my ability to do other things. Like for example, I can take my face color, and let's just kind of zoom in here. I'm going to make this a little on the ugly side, but oh wait, I did change my dilation, so I'm going to put that back at default. Okay, so it should be defaulted here with yours, where it's my softness and my dilation should be 0. My colors should be white. But we can actually play with that and change it. So I'm going to change my color here. You know, and I'm going to be a little bit garish here for this tutorial, but this is not normally how I'd run things in real industry. But I'm going to give myself some nice green text here. Let's see, to demonstrate that I can. And then we can also change our softness and some of our other things. So like, for example, if I zoom in on this, it'll make it easier to kind of notice the effect here. But as I increase the softness, you can see that it gets fuzzy and blurry. This is actually how I see words all the time with my glasses. But anyways, we can change the softness. And then the other thing we can do here is either dilate, making the text a little bit thicker, which is great if there's like a really thin font that you like that you just wish was a little thicker and easier to read. Or we can dilate it really thin, which even with a basic font I think gives kind of a cool look. It looks kind of broken up and not quite there. But what we're going to do is I'm going to dilate it just a little heavy. I'm going to go like 1.2. And I have a reason why I'm doing this later. So I don't necessarily like how that looks, but it's going to help me out with the next trick that I'm going to do. One of the other things I've got here is outline. And again, when I click that, it's going to add an outline to it. And yours starts off probably at 0, but as I increase that number, and what I'm going to do is just eat up, if I do 0.2, it's eating up that extra dilation that I did, but it's making it into a border instead. And normally, like, I'm a big fan of the black outline. Look at how much crisper and easier that is to read. I just really like that look. But, you know, we can also go a little bit crazy That looks very 90s, 90s neon kind of a look. And I'm going to leave that for now, only because just to show the different components that we can work with. Again, this is not something I would do in real world, but it's a tutorial and it's kind of fun. Okay, and then the other thing we can do here is we can mess with the underlay. And again, I already, looks like it retained some settings from last time, but if I play around with my X offset, it's going to make it go to and fro. My Y offset is going to make it go up and down. And then again, dilation is going to control that size. And yours is probably started off with no dilation to begin with, so you're going to have to increase it to see anything. And then again, we can kind of, the softness is going to adjust that blur or crispness. So that looks like a really bold, firm shadow. That looks a little, fuzzier for lack of more technical definition. And we can also change that coloring. I'm going to make it kind of an intense blue. And I've got my alpha on full. And that's going to really make that drop shadow show up. Again, this is very 90s. It's honestly quite ugly, but we're getting kind of the point across on what are our capabilities with the TextMesh Pro. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that, even though honestly part of me is dying a little inside. But we did kind of demonstrate how we can edit our text. And that drop shadow really does help us see. The other thing I do want to do, and I am going to be a little bit more professional here, is, and I already had changed this on my version of it, yours is probably not yet, is I did change the skybox, if on the main camera, I changed the skybox to a solid color and made it black, and what that's going to do for me is it's going to look a lot cleaner. It doesn't have that kind of token Unity background horizon line. It looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit more professional here. So we're going to go ahead and leave that just like that. So now it's time to make the text box actually react to changes and data. And really what we're going to do is, rather than have objects, the text object quote unquote react to things, we're just going to have it constantly update itself with the correct data. And really, I want to display all the data. I want to know how much cache I have. I want to know how many clicks per second I have. And I want to know what my cache per click is. So what we're going to do here is right on the text object, again, I'm going to add a new script. We're going to call this one textbox script. Create an add. And this is going to be a relatively simple script. We're not going to do a whole lot of work here. In fact, this is one of the only scripts we're going to do that we're only really going to have to touch once and then we're done with it. We'll never come back to it again. The code for this one is really pretty simple. There's only one slightly complicated bit at the very beginning, and then that's it. So two things that this text box needs to know is, where is it going to get its data from is thing one. And it's going to get it from our game manager script, which we're going to reference as game man. And then it needs to know where its text is. And this is a little complicated. It's in a TextMesh Pro. Whoops, I accidentally hit the wrong keystroke. Okay, TextMesh Pro UGUI. For Unity GUI system. And we're just going to call that my text. But what we're going to notice here is that it doesn't default. And if yours at home does, because some of the newer versions of Unity are defaulting with this already set up, then you don't need to worry about it. But if yours is redlining and it's not working, it's probably because up here you don't have the right using. We need to use TM Pro. Which again, if you have that already at home, you don't need to do this next step, but if you don't, it's helpful. So there's a lot of ways we can do it. If we know the library, you just manually type it in. That actually works pretty well. But we're going to pretend I don't know the library. And so I do know I got this right. Maybe I borrowed that code from something else online. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're following a tutorial like mine. But regardless, I know that this is correct. It's just not working. So if we right click on it and go to quick actions and refactorings, we get a whole bunch of options, and one of them is using TM Pro. Now, if you've misspelled something, this isn't going to work. If you've miscapitalized or something else, again, this isn't going to work. But if you can see using TM Pro, if I click on that, it's going to make everything work right. And again, that will only work if this is spelled correctly. It's like, oh, yeah, you just need to add that library in, and you're good to go. So now that we have those two things, we need to teach our text object which objects do we want to look at. We know that there is a game manager script out there. We know that there is some text out there. Which game manager and which text do we want to look at? So in our start, we're going to find all that. We'll start with our game manager, and to find that, we are going to go to game object, game object, capital G, dot find game object with tag. And you want the singular version of this. The plural version is going to give you the absolute wrong result. You absolutely do not want that. You want the singular version. Find game object with tag. And we want the tag that we set earlier, which is game controller. We're going to do a get component, and we are going to find, that game manager script. Okay, so that one's done. We need to do the same thing with the text object, which is the text box attached to our own game object. So we don't have to really find anything. We just already kind of know where it is. We just need to get that component. So we're going to do my text equals get component. Again, text mesh pro UGUI. And there we go. Easy peasy. Okay, that was actually the hard part. Okay, the last part that we need to do is simply set up our display. So every update tick, what I want to do is set my text's text equal to, and we're going to just kind of put in all of our data. So I'm going to do cache, and the space here is key for formatting purposes. And a lot of people are probably already kind of second guessing and going, oh, we need to add the $sign because we're going to want to render this like cache. No, we're going to do a different trick here, so please don't do that. We're going to do GameMan dot, because GameMan is our game manager, it has a cache variable. And cache is actually kind of convenient because in C#, floats have a toString value that includes some formatting options. And one of the formatting options, if we do quote C2, this is a lowercase c. If we do quote C2, it'll actually do a double decimal formatting, so like .00 or .52 or whatever, and it will actually round it to the nearest two-digit decimal. And I think C stands for cache because it'll also add the $sign. So if we save this and run our game, we should immediately see the update from it. It's saying 00, and as I click on my cookie, that cache is increasing. We've got the $sign, everything is formatted pretty. Everything looks good. But we also, again, want to display that other data. Whoops, that got messed up. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add a few more things. I also want to show the cache per click and some other things. Now, we could do this with 3 different text boxes, but then we would have to write 3 different scripts. We'd have to do more management. It's just a lot more cumbersome. So what we're going to do instead is I'm just going to set up my cache, and what I want to do is just do a new line. And to do a new line, we can't just break inside the quotes. You can see that didn't work the way I was hoping it would. What we need to do instead is use what's called an escape sequence. And as a lot of you may know from other languages or other experience, and some of you might not, if we do \n, that is what we call an escape sequence, and that tells the computer, no, I don't want to print just a \n. I actually want it to break the line and give me a new line. N is for new line. And so then I can do cache per click. colon, and again, the space for formatting purposes, plus, and I'm going to break the line here. You don't need to, but I'm trying to keep this more readable for those of you following along at home. So, I did this all in one long line. You can just, you can too, but I've got it broken here so that way it's more readable on the screen. I'm going to do game manager dot cash per click. And then let's see here, dot toString. We are again going to use the C2 trick. Make sure you keep that lowercase. And then I'm just going to keep on going and do my another \n with cache per second. And again, gameman.cache per second dot toString and C2, again, all lowercase. Okay, we're going to save that, and that should actually be the last time we have to touch that code, assuming everything works. We're going to go ahead and run this. And I've got cache per click 1, cache per second 0, and look at that. Everything is working beautifully. So I think that's going to be a good stopping point for this particular tutorial. We got quite a bit done here. We learned how to use a centralized game manager. We learned how to set up some tags on it. We learned how to make our various objects interact with that game manager directly. And we did learn a little bit about text manipulation using TextMesh Pro. Also how to use the Quick Actions refactorings tool. So there's a nice little bit of ground covered on this one. In the next session, we're going to start working on those power-ups because right now our game is dreadfully boring. It doesn't really, quote unquote, do anything. We can click forever, and I suppose you could click a billion times and get up to a billion cash, but it is not a very exciting game. So what we're going to start doing is adding some power-ups to expand it, and so we will cover that in tutorial 3. I hope this was helpful for you guys and that you learned some things. As always, if you found it helpful, useful, whatever, please like and subscribe. And as always, when we close, I'd like to say keep on creating, and we hope you join us for the next session. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.